the mistakes of the last economic upswing, when the previous government spending got out of control, interest rates went sky high, and the export sector led the economy into recession. Because of the government's responsible economic management, the budget will set out some increased spending in priority areas that make a real difference to the lives of New Zealanders. This has been reflected in our pre-budget announcements over the past fortnight. For example, we've announced $22 million over 4 years for community budgeting services. There's $10.4 million over 2 years to support frontline sexual violence services. We've confirmed $20 million more over 4 years for extra support for children at risk of getting rheumatic fever. In addition, the government is investing up to $20 million for an extra 6,000 places in the apprenticeship reboot scheme as part of the business growth agenda. So you can see that despite a reasonably tight fiscal position, my government is prepared to invest more money in priority areas where we can make a real difference. The budget on Thursday will also continue the government's focus on ensuring its revenue base is protected and that everyone is paying their fair share of tax. The great majority of New Zealanders meet their tax obligations voluntarily. It's simply unfair when the small minority do not. So I can confirm today that inland revenue will be allocated $132 million over the next 5 years to bolster its tax compliance activities, for chasing up unfiled returns and for writing off tax unlikely to be paid. The breakdown of this allocation is $48.6 million in cash for inland revenue to undertake these activities, including more staff to proactively contact tardy taxpayers or taxpayers who are failing to pay their rightful amount of tax. The remaining $84 million is to cover tax being written off where it's unlikely to be paid. It's conservatively estimated this funding will increase the Crown's gross revenue by almost $300 million over the next 5-year period. This initiative builds on the government's wider program going back 4 budgets to tighten the rules and compliance around tax. Since 2010, the government has increased inland revenues funding to boost its tax compliance and collection activities. This has been a worthwhile investment. It's allowed inland revenue to collect more tax from the hidden economy, the property sector, aggressive tax planning and fraud. So far, this has increased the government's gross tax revenue by an estimated $530 million. So opposition claims that property speculators and big business are getting away without paying their fair share of tax are completely wrong. I intend to take questions in a moment, but before I do that, I'm sure that all New Zealanders would join me in deploring and condemning the kidnapping of more than 200 school girls by Boko Haram militants in Nigeria. Aside from causing immense and needless trauma and suffering, acts like this have the longer-term purpose of discouraging families from allowing their daughters an education. About 6 weeks ago, I announced that we had designated Boko Haram as an international terrorist group under the Terrorism Suppression Act. That's one way that New Zealand supports international efforts and the Nigerian government to combat this terrorist organisation. The safety of Nigerian citizens is primarily the responsibility of the Nigerian government, though we are pleased to see members of the international community offering assistance in this case. We've not been asked to do so, and realistically other countries are better placed to help than us. However, we can add our voice to those of governments and citizens around the world calling for the girls' safe return to their desperate families. The education of girls and the respect for rights of women are hallmarks of a developed and successful country. We will continue to follow this situation closely. Just in terms of the House this week, the government intends to make progress on the Food Bill, the Veterans Support Bill, the Credit Contracts and Financial Services Law Reform Bill. I'm sure you're all aware Thursday is Budget Day. In terms of my activities, I'll be here in question time for Tuesday and Wednesday. Thursday will be budget. On Friday I'll have a range of budget activities from breakfast and lunch in Auckland. Questions?
Will families after this budget feel more confident, particularly those looking to have new babies? Will they feel more confident given what's going to be in this budget?
Well, if you're asking me whether there will be an extension to paid parental leave or other matters in that area, you'll have to wait till Thursday. But I mean, what the government has said is that we understand the benefits of extending things like paid parental leave. The question's always been about how much we can afford. On Thursday, we have to see if we've managed to find a little bit of extra cash in the tin.
What about for those who don't qualify for paid parental leave, and there's quite a big chunk of families that don't?
Yeah, on our analysis, I think it's only about 40% of people are actually eligible for paid parental leave. So that's certainly an area the government has looked at. Again, you'll have to wait and see till Thursday whether there's any movement in that area.
On state funding of election campaigns, Labor and Greens say we need to have a conversation, a public conversation about that. What do you think about that idea?
Well, I think it's actually really healthy that they've come out and said what their real agenda of last week's attacks were, because the reality is that Labor and the Greens fundraise extensively. In the case of the Labor Party, they get hundreds of thousands, if not millions, from the unions. The unions select their leader, and the unions have clear influence on their policies in relation to education and employment. The Greens, we also know, have taken substantial donations from people who are interested in the policies of the Green Party. My view is that New Zealand taxpayers will be able to find a lot better alternatives for the spending of their money than funding the election campaign of Labor and the Greens, so we're opposed.
What do you think the public would say and say a referendum on this matter?
Well, a referendum probably cost a hell of a lot more than the actual amount of state funding for a year or two. They're quite expensive exercises. But look, in general, there's a form of state funding at the moment around television and radio advertising, as you'll be aware. I think as a general rule, the public will say, look, political parties should run their own campaigns and fund them through their own measures. All political parties are free to do that. There are guidelines and rules. We now have a full disclosure regime, and I'd be absolutely amazed if the public want to go out there, dip in their pocket and pay for an election campaign of the Labor Party or the Greens.
Have you seen the surplus figure, and are you happy with it?
Yeah, of course I've seen the surplus figure. You mean the one we're announcing on Thursday?
Yes.
Yeah, no, of course I've seen that. Yeah, well, I think the big story there is we're back in surplus, which if you accept the position we inherited at the back end of 2008, Treasury didn't think that was likely or possible. I think there'll be plenty of Australians who will be looking across the Tasman when they hear how large their deficit is on Tuesday night and see our surplus on Thursday, and will say that's an impressive result that we've achieved over here in New Zealand. But on the other side of the coin, clearly, all predictions, it's a much smaller surplus than the surplus for the out years, which is expected to grow.
So is wafer thin a good description, or is it rice paper thin, or how would you describe it?
Oh, look, on the scheme of things, it's a small number because it's the difference between two very, very large numbers. But yeah, it's robust enough, I'm confident, to get through the process where the books are again opened up in a few months' time as we go into the election campaign under the Public Finance Act.
Labor is committing to surpluses now. Do you see that as, I guess, a victory for National in the sense that they're basically locked into your prescription?
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing, I saw the hype this morning about David Cunliffe having an alternative budget, and I suppose at one level it lived up to my expectations. You know, it was a target and a wish. I mean, the problem is that they're saying they're going to have surpluses, and they're saying they're going to get unemployment down to 4% or whatever. But actually, if you look at all of the pro-growth, pro-surplus initiatives undertaken by my government in the last 5.5 years, almost every single one of them Labor have opposed. They're opposed to employment law changes. They're opposed to the savings that we came through in various different budgets. They've been opposed to everything from KiwiSaver changes right through to changes in consenting for the RMA. They're opposed to oil and gas exploration. They're opposed to the changes we made to the public service. You can just go on and on and on. So, yeah, it's a wish and a target and a dream. But if people want reality, I think they're going to have to look for the national budget, which we delivered on Thursday.
And is 4% realistic?
Well, look, the target actually in the budget is 4.5%. I can tell you that for a fact for the 2017. That's what's tracking at. That's likely to be predictable. We are running, I think we're going to fulfill our target of creating 170,000 jobs we talked about some years ago. So the economy's going well, but under a Labor Greens government that's anti-growth, anti-jobs, anti-development, anti-mining, anti-farming, there's no way they're going to get unemployment down. Unemployment will be going up.
So David Cunliffe says he's staking his political reputation on this 4% figure. What do you make of that?
Yeah, well, I mean, the reality is it's not about what target you have or what figure you have, it's what policies you have to back that up. So are they still opposed to the expansion of agriculture with a Greens partner? Absolutely. Are they opposed to oil and gas exploration? Absolutely they are. Are they proposing to tighten up employment legislation in New Zealand? Absolutely they are. Are they going to raise taxes on New Zealanders and slow down the economy? Absolutely they are. Are they going to go out there and spend more taxpayers' money and have to fund that through other measures? You sure can bet they are. So yeah, I can have a dream of becoming an All Black too, but the probability of Steve Hansen naming me in the squad coming up in the next few months is next to zero.
The policy today was called jobs and surplus targets, but he actually failed to announce a surplus target. And when we pushed on that, he said on average and over a couple of years kind of thing. What do you make of that?
Well, look, it's the same as the big tool that they came out with. They can't tell you how much they'd take out of your pay packet. We've been asking them for weeks now. Just tell us how much you would have to raise KiwiSaver by to actually slow down the economy and stop the Reserve Bank having to raise interest rates. A very simple question. They can't answer that. On the calculations we've done, they'd have to take your KiwiSaver contribution to 15%. And in the absence of any other discussion or points they want to make, you have to accept that's right. But look, in the end, as I said, this is a pipe dream. It's not a budget or an alternative budget.
On the TVNZ report into Shane Coding, do you think Shane Coding would be a Labour Party candidate?
Well, I've only had a really cursory look at it, but I would struggle to believe that the Labour Party are going to select this guy.
What do you make of the findings of the report?
I think it sounds to me as if Television New Zealand's taking on board the findings and the learnings of that report, and they'll implement them. As I said some months or weeks ago when the report was, or the issue was first raised, I personally don't think Television New Zealand's biased, and you know, we can all have employees that can do odd things, so they'll obviously tighten up their systems and that'll probably be implemented.
Why do you struggle to believe that Labour will select Chantal?
Well, just cursory reading the report, I mean, I think the findings are that there isn't bias, but there is potentially misuse of funds or funds that are used in different places.
In your cursory reading, what concerned you?
Oh, just that I just don't think they're going to select this guy. We'll wait and see.
You mentioned earlier that you saw 4.5% for 2017.
I think that's the
that's
year.
talking about growth? Or?
No, that's the unemployment rate.
Just on the inter-islander ferries, what do you make of Winston Peters' claims that KiwiRail covered up 3 incidents?
About as credible as the ones it's been making against Judith Collins. I mean, there is no cover-up. There's been 3 instances that have been reported to the Minister of Transport's office. He's dealt with the matters or informed of them as required.
Given the numerous problems we've seen, do you think KiwiRail are competent enough to carry out its ferry operations?
Yes, I do, but clearly they've got, for a variety of reasons, problems with their ferries. I mean, the government's going to be investing a better part, or will invest a better part of $1 billion in KiwiRail, and there's more money for them in the budget on Thursday. So we're investing heavily in them, but you know, Labour essentially bought back at a very high price an asset that was very run down, and KiwiRail management will have to deal with that over time as they look to upgrade their ferry capability and their services.
Is your tax crackdown targeting mum and dad with a fish and chip shop, or big corporates, or both?
Well, it's for them to decide where they believe they can gain the most revenue, but there's no question that when people say New Zealand doesn't have a capital gains tax on property, it's not true. We do have a capital gains tax. It applies to speculators. It's an intent-based rule, but certainly history tells you that a lot of the extra, nearly $500 million of the revenue that they've got in the last few years cracking down this has come from property speculators and those that haven't paid their fair share of tax. And just generally people who've set up tax evasion schemes or tax avoidance schemes that aren't lawful. So it's really looking more in the high net worth end and also the sort of corporate end.
How much of that 132 million therefore is allocated to the base erosion profit shifting part of the tax?
Yeah, I think there's different money going there. This is mainly for people looking at those who are actually doing either tax planning that we don't think is lawful or simply are undertaking activity where they should have paid tax but have unlawfully, in the revenue's mind, not paid their fair share of tax.
Do you think there's much scope to increase revenues through that base erosion profit shifting thing, given they've got
potentially, but some of that's the global work that's going to happen around multinationals that the leadership's been involved in.
Just going back to the priority areas for government spending.
Yeah.
Is the pay of rest home workers, caregivers, a priority for the government in terms of coming to that particular party?
Yeah, look, it's one of the issues that, again, we've been looking at over time. I'm not going to argue it's fully resolved today, but the government acknowledges that there's anomalies in the two categories of workers that work in that area, and also that these are very low paid workers. So it's an issue we're working on.
Is there anything in the budget?
Well, I'm not in a position to make that announcement today.
Can
Given-
I just ask you about Pike River?
Sure.
What's the reason the re-entry's been delayed until June?
Yeah, so the reason is that the final sign-off has to come from the Solid Energy Board, and they, as effectively directors of the company, which I assume is the lessee of the mine, have the final responsibility. Now, it's gone through a process of the high hazard unit and the likes, but as directors, they have the legal requirements. So they are likely to do that, my understanding is quite soon. You've had issues with the chairman, I think, has been unwell, so he's been on leave, and I think they've just been working through some other final reporting. But it's our expectation that they will enter the mine in terms of the drift, and there's clear allocation money to make that happen.
So they don't need any more resources?
It's not a financial issue. The
Right.
Nolan reporting I've seen from my department.
And do you think they'll ever get into the main workings?
I don't, but I repeat to accept I'm not an engineer, but my just general thinking and discussions I've had with people who have been very heavily involved in this area have always said to me, look, there's been major explosions, tremendous fire in there, probably excessive water damage. It's likely to be a highly unstable environment. So it's one thing to go up the drift where it's granite, and so even then they're worried about roof rockfall. I think it would be quite a different issue to go into the workings of the mine. If you were to do that, I suppose anything is technically possible, but it would be quite a difficult exercise.
Just on another one, the budget, and looking at the Australian budget tomorrow, do you think Tony Abbott will be delivering the sort of budget that maybe a lot of your some of your bankers are due to deliver for your first budget? There was sort of like timeline response to the economy.
Yeah, well, look, what I think is going to happen on Tuesday and then on Thursday is there'll be quite a contrast between Australia and New Zealand. And the amazing thing about that is that Australia has had faster rising commodity prices than New Zealand's had. I think if you want a living example of what a Labor Greens government looks like and how expensive that is to run, it's called Australia. Because they had virtually no public sector debt in 2007 when John Howard left office. They are going to rack up an enormous deficit on Tuesday, probably pretty close to $50 billion. So my view is that we're in a strong position in terms of the budget we're taking to the people of New Zealand. The situation was different in 2009 when we delivered our first budget. You'll remember that we'd had the recession and of course the global financial crisis. And so actually, if anything, the argument from commentators, both economic and political, were that the government should be doing more to stimulate the economy, not less. So they are in a different position. They've got the United States recovering, Europe's economy slowly recovering, Asia still remaining reasonably strong, so it's a different set of circumstances.
Given you've got this tight budget outlook, does it concern you that more than $500 million is being paid in benefits to people who are earning more than $70,000 as New Zealand superannuitants?
No, I think one of the beauties of the New Zealand superannuation scheme is that it's universal and therefore it's very uncomplicated. It's easy for people to understand. If we were to go out here and what would be effectively means test New Zealand super, we would be discouraging people from saving and we would be discouraging people from working over 65. And I think we'd be putting perverse incentives in the system. We'd essentially be telling someone, set up a KiwiSaver account when you start working, but by the way, when you do save, we'll take that money off you when you're over 65 because you'll have a higher level of savings. So I think the simplicity of the New Zealand super scheme as it currently stands is both affordable and the right setting.
But is it fair though, given that the government has been pretty tough about shifting people off benefits and into work? Those younger people who see people earning good income and on top of that a benefit.
Yeah, but I think on the other side of the coin, if somebody works incredibly hard in their life, might work 2 or 3 jobs, might work an excessive amount of overtime, may have done significant training, be upskilled, may have a higher stressed job. They're all reasons why their savings could potentially be a lot higher. Would it then be fair to take those savings effectively off those people for their enterprise and hard work? So that's the balancing act you've got here. And I mean, if someone is in the workforce, or if they've got high levels of savings, then they'll still be paying taxes. So those taxes will still be going towards what is effectively their New Zealand superannuation payments.
Would you encourage those people on really high incomes with high levels of savings not to take up the New Zealand superannuation?
Well, I don't have the precise number today, but last time I looked at it, which was years ago, I think it was around about 3% of New Zealanders don't take New Zealand super. I could be wrong on that number, that's probably what I think is about right. So there's certainly plenty of New Zealanders that don't take New Zealand super, high income individuals. Some do, some don't.
Your paid parental leave announcement on Thursday, how much debate?
You might be slightly ahead of yourself, but yeah.
How much debate was there in Cabinet about how long it's limited by?
Well, you're going to have to wait till Thursday to see what our announcements are.
With regards
Nice try, mate.
Christchurch's flood woes, a task force was set up to come up with some short-term solutions, and they've had, they've met their 2-week deadline and haven't come up with anything. How concerning is that?
Yeah, so what I'd say is it's a good first start, and it shows that, from what I can see, just having a quick read of it, that the vast bulk of homes are not identified in the category of being at the most extreme end, so it gives a sense of the scale. It also identifies that there's plenty of homes in the most vulnerable position that aren't actually in the Flockton Basin. But the real point is, well, what happens next? What's the action plan, and what's required of the government as a partner with the Christchurch City Council to enact that plan that's currently missing? And so, all I can really say is the government stands ready, as we did back in, I think, March, to support the people of Christchurch and people in Flockton Basin. As soon as we can get presented with an action plan of what is required, then we can assess that and determine what level of contribution we'll make.
But that's the problem, there is no plan yet.
No, but we appreciate the pressure they're under. We're obviously just actively encouraging them to give us that information as quickly as they can, and just reiterate what we've said in the past, we're more than happy to give them support in terms of resources.
Just on the pension, would you take the pension?
I think it's pretty unlikely, to be honest. If I did, I'd take it to donate it. That sort of seems a bit secular, so I don't think I would.
Just on Boko Haram,
Yep.
you mentioned the Nigerian government hasn't actually asked New Zealand for assistance.
No.
Would you think of offering special forces assistance as a gesture of how seriously you take this incident?
Well, I guess, if the government came and asked us to offer some sort of support, whatever that might be, we'd always, of course, look at that because of the seriousness of the situation. But, I think it's very unlikely they would ask us. I think it'd be extremely unlikely.
No, the question was really whether you would offer.
No, I don't think voluntarily offer. I think if they reached out to governments all around the world for support, whatever that support looked like, then we'd assess that on its merits. But as I said in my remarks, I think we are unlikely to be in that position to do anything other than offer the support we have, which was essentially designate Boko Haram as a terrorist group that New Zealand recognises and offer our moral support.
So there isn't a place for the expertise of our SAS in this context?
I suppose there theoretically could be, but I don't think it's likely they'd ask us. I think they probably have a range of capabilities that they could draw on, which is much closer to home.
Please do the comments back.
Assume Thursday. Okay.
Have you spoken to her since she's been available?
Well, actually, she just sent me a text before, but outside that, no, I haven't spoken to her.
Say anything good?
I won't bother. Okay, thanks, right.